Welcome, listeners. Welcome, viewers. It's Adrian here from Market Attack, and we've got another amazing guest on today's show. We've actually had another rare legend on the show before, Dr. David Doak, but we've got Kevin Bayliss here today. So, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. We are big fans of your work, and I've actually always wanted to get you on the show, so it's a real honor to have you on today. So, thank you.
Brilliant. It's funny you say that. I was speaking to David Doak about 40 minutes ago.
You couldn't
We're
make
doing a
it up.
project. We're doing a teaching project this weekend with David Wise over in Norway, and so we've been putting our heads together with that. So we'll have a long weekend this week, but yes, he's a great guy. So
And he gave a great interview before, and I'm sure it's been
yeah.
equally as good. But he was a very humble, gave some great stories, and I can't wait to hear your side of the story as well. Kevin, before we get to like Rare and Donkey Kong and all your big hits, I'd love to know how you actually first entered the video game industry. What made you become? I know you've always been interested in art, I'm assuming, but what sort of led you to the video game industry?
Well, I guess I was always into what you would call video games, the little handheld things that you'd have got in the 1980s. As soon as they arrived on the scene, and they kind of stole me away from my back garden pond and all of the frogs and stuff that I used to just be fascinated by, and I used to draw them and paint them. But then I managed to get a really cheap thing off the market called, I think it was just called Space Invaders, but it wasn't. It was a little tiny black plastic 9-volt battery powered thing with the lights that flashed on, and you pressed a button at the right time and it got like a screen overlay that
Yeah.
made it look like it looked very 70s. And I think those things are worth quite a bit of money now. But once I'd got that, and I think my parents used to go to the local supermarket, and in the foyer they it was quite a big supermarket for the time. They installed a Space Invaders cabinet, and then something became an asteroids cabinet, and then there was a Galaxian, or I think it was Battlezone, the tank vector
Nice.
one. And so my brother and me would just sit and play that while my mom and dad would go and do the shopping, and he just thought it was magical. I didn't really understand it. My dad was totally against it, complete technophobe. And if he took us out anywhere, and maybe he took us maybe to a pub one night for a can of Vimto and crisps if my mom was at Keep Fit, I can remember seeing it was Cosmic Gorilla or something like that, and I looked at it and I didn't understand it because I'd never seen one before, and I was messing around with a joystick and I didn't realize you had to put money in.
Yeah.
I thought I was actually playing it, and my dad, of course, wasn't gonna put any money in. And then I discovered, as I say, when we went to the supermarket, that it was a game and you got 10 pence, and it usually lasted about 5 minutes, if that, between us, and then we'd squabble and just fall around in the foyer until my parents came back with a shopping trolley full of stuff. But, yeah, I just started drawing, Space Invaders and stuff instead of the frogs and toads. And, then I think, I got a ZX81, my brother got a ZX Spectrum. I'd sneak into my brother's room because it was a far better thing to play. But I used to type in so much of my software from a magazine called Sinclair Programs, and that was how I got most of my games on my ZX81. So it taught me to create my own graphics,
Yeah.
if you can call them graphics, on a ZX81. But I understood them. And then when I got to my brother's, I'd start making small ASCII character comic pictures of my friends and me, and programming a little tune that went beep, beep, beep to accompany it. And then I got an Acorn Electron, and my friend and me, we wrote a vector drawing software program, and then a small art program with a fill command in it and everything. And I started sending pictures off to video game companies because I wanted to work in the industry then, but I had no idea how. And I sent a cassette with some artwork on to this company called Rare, and they were only 8 miles away from me. I had no idea how close they were. And, yeah, it was a picture of Thundercats. It was 1987, and I've actually got the magazine here, the same one, the Computer and Video Games magazine, to promote Thundercats game, and it had got a cassette on the front of it with a demo. And I thought, "That looks great," and I love the music. And my friend up the road, he had an Amiga, and he had a Commodore 64, but he was this lucky kid that had CompuNet, and so he downloaded all these tools and
Um,
fancy bits and pieces of code. And there was one piece in particular which allowed you to play Rob Hubbard music and stuff like that, whilst you put a picture on the screen, and then it printed a scrolling message along the bottom in those double height characters that cycled in color.
yeah.
So I drew this Thundercats picture by tracing it with cellophane, putting it onto my black and white TV, and then tracing what I'd traced with a felt pen as a guide. And then slowly on my Commodore 64, then I started to make a picture, and then I saved it and put it together with this scrolling message along the bottom with I think it was the Dragon's Lair music that you got on there, and I had my phone number on it and everything, and then I got this call from Tim. I said, "Would you like to come and take a look at the place?" And I was adamant I was gonna go and work at a company called Elite that were based
Yep.
in Lichfield,
Yeah.
and I didn't know who Rare were, and I was kind of fobbing Tim off on the phone saying, "Oh, no," I was quite arrogant, only just turned 16, and I had no idea that I was getting a job opportunity. He said, "Well, you," I said, "There's no way in there because it's a village in the middle of nowhere." He said, "Well, it's okay. We've got somebody that can bring you in, every day of the week." And I thought, and I did think that he's pressuring me here, but my grandparents lived on the other side, and I told my parents, and they says, "Well, we'll take you there and drop you off. We'll go and see the grandparents on the Friday night, and then we'll come and collect you afterwards on the way back about 9 p.m." So they did that, and I walked up these steps in this farmhouse, and Tim greeted me and took me upstairs and showed me this white studio with a great big drawing desk on there with lots of fluorescence tubes inside it and all of this tracing paper with grids on, and it had the cover to Elrond, the Wizards and Warriors Japanese version. He was working on the title page to that, but I didn't know what Nintendo was. I had no idea what it was he was doing. And then he pulled out this rack with all of this full-size, sort of 5 foot tall pieces of artwork, which was airbrushed. And it was all of the covers from Ultimate, Play the Game, Underworld, Saberwolf, Night Law, everything like that. And my jaw just dropped and I thought, "Oh my God, I've left a
This
motherless."
is
And they showed me around and he said, "So do you think this is the kind of thing you can do? Would you like to work here?" And I just thought, "No, I couldn't possibly do this. It looks far too difficult," and nodded my head. And I stayed there for about an hour or so. Had a look around, got introduced to Mark Bettridge and Chris Stamper, and then my parents came and collected me. And they were just pleased that I'd got something interesting which looked like a job opportunity because my careers officer had told me I was living in cloud cuckoo land when I approached them, and my art teacher told me I was never gonna make it as an artist, which my mum and
wow.
dad echoed to me. So I wasn't, in a good place. I just thought I was just drawing pictures and sending them randomly off. And then just to clinch the deal, to convince my parents that they weren't messing around, just before we left, Tim says, "Oh, would you like to look at my car before you go?"
Oh,
And he
nice.
took them over to this, barn with 2 great big doors and slid the doors open, and inside was this Lamborghini sitting underneath a network of, well, nets really to stop all of the pigeons' nests from dropping on top of this car. And I think from that moment on, my mum and dad thought, "Yeah, this is a proper thing." And it was a clever
Yeah.
thing for Tim to do because he wanted them to be behind me with it. And I started the following week after giving up my college course, which I'd taken, and I was there for nearly 19 years. So
I mean, I guess we'll never know if you went to Elite, that a very respected company, let's be honest, but wow, Rare it just seemed like it had to,
yeah, but I had no idea who Rare were, and I was the first artist there. So there was just myself and Tim listening to Belinda Carlisle, Heaven on Earth, and it was the happiest time. Because I'd suddenly left school, smallest kid in school, didn't know what I wanted to do. Only all I wanted to do was take art, and you couldn't just take art; you had to take everything else. And all of my friends had career plans, and I hadn't got a clue other than wanting to do art, and as I say, my careers officer was useless. I wish I could meet him now, actually. I remember driving across the bridge on my way to, work one day and seeing my art teacher coming towards me over the same bridge, and she was in an old knackered Austin Princess, and I was in this Lotus at the time.
Oh no.
And that's the one that said you'd never make it as an artist, and I just thought it's such a mean thing to say and such an unwise thing to tell people, living in cloud cuckoo land, you'll never make it, because it's usually it'll have one effect or the other. You're either gonna destroy that person or you're gonna make that person so determined, rather than getting some support, which is what you needed, and some direction. And I didn't find that. I didn't My parents, the industry was very new. My parents didn't know what to do with me. My brother didn't know what to do with me. He knew what I wanted because he knew games, but he went and got a proper job.
Mm,
So for me, it was it was it was kind of like wanting to be special effects or getting into the film industry or something like that, but there wasn't one. There wasn't an industry here. All we'd ever heard was people were making games in their bedrooms
that's right.
and making millions. And when you told anybody, when I told them all at college that this is what I was going to do, my friend that was with me, who I also got a job at Rare along with some of the others, he was at the college and he was explaining to the guy that was the head of our course that I'd taken, that no, the because he said, "Oh, these companies, they come and go every 5 minutes. You'd be better off staying at college." And my friend Doug, he said to him, "No, no, this isn't just any old company though. They've already had a good 10 years stint as, since the early '80s," and explained who they were. But I took the job and I was whisked away to Chicago, meeting millionaires and wrestling stars and football team owners and the president of Nintendo. And then they took me to Japan, and it
Wow.
was just a far cry from comprehensive school in Tamworth with no, secondary education, qualifications or anything. It was just amazing. It was brilliant.
It's amazing. Yeah, very inspirational as well. So, if people are listening, don't give up and
Yeah.
go for it, isn't it? Yeah, go
It's
for their
good to
creative
have a
dreams.
backup plan, you know, as well, and because I've got friends. I did the music thing as well. I've got friends that are musicians, and there's so much competition out there, and just like trying to get into the games industry, it is quite difficult to get in there. But there's nothing to stop you doing it yourself now because you've got so many tools available, which we didn't have. You needed to find those like-minded people to get into that career
Of course.
path and follow that with people that can guide you. Whereas now you've only got to look on YouTube and you could make a game next week. You know?
It's mad. And actually, I don't want to detour too much, but obviously, I'm sure you know all too well, AI is absolutely crazy right now when it comes to artwork.
Yeah,
Again, I don't want to put you on the spot and make you feel uncomfortable, but do you have an opinion about that? Do you think
I do
it's
have an opinion. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it's awesome, but I never use it to create something. The reason I really think it's awesome is because for me, at the beginning of the year, I'm so busy. I'm doing stuff with Dave. I'm doing teaching stuff. I'm working at Platonic. I've got God knows how many different projects going on. But I need a PA, and I haven't got one.
yeah, yeah.
But I've discovered ChatGPT, and it's now my PA. And I set myself up a one-page website, which I couldn't have done just by telling it exactly what I wanted. I just general advice like that, and using it as a PA, I think is fantastic. I've even used it to I did a load of pencil sketches, and I would draw over them in Clip Studio Paint and get them all inked up and looking nice. And then I thought, "Yes, I've done all of this. Can I use the AI to do the donkey work and ink over my sketches?" And I just, out of curiosity, I thought, well, because I was talking to a girl that was at a course that we were doing in Norway, and she was trying to put a project together, and she said, I can do it all, but I haven't got the time, and I've got these people helping me do this, and I can draw all this and I can do that, but to make the animation, I says, well, what's that telling you? He says, if you haven't got a team, then you should surely use some sort of AI to help you do the donkey work. I mean, years ago, rotoscoping is what Disney, they drew over frames hand by
That's right.
hand, but they didn't. you didn't have your best artists doing it. You had trained artists, you had people that were doing more sort of mundane tasks like tracing over stuff. And now you've got a computer to do that kind of stuff or work it out. So if you want to release something, I think it's great to use it as a tool, but it'll never take the place of creativity. You're still directing it. It's like having a team at your fingertips. So if you wanted to put something together and you know what you want and you've drawn everything, you can get the computer to help you. But it doesn't always work. As say, for instance, I told it to do this inking over of my sketches and I looked at it and it looked fantastic. But I thought, but it looks too clinically clean and too special and it
Right.
looked like a vector cutout that you would have got on an old special edition Game Boy. It looks
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
precise and so perfect. I said, "No, that's good, but now I can at least see how it looks inked. I'll do it myself." Actually,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough.
and I did it myself, but it was a great way to see and
Test it.
visualize.
Yeah.
And I compared mine to it. I looked at mine, and then I looked at it was actually the Donkey Kong character
Oh, nice. Yeah.
that I've got on my, Insta and on my X profile at the moment. There's a picture of Donkey Kong looking at some concept art. I sketched him, and then I couldn't be bothered to ink over it, and so I asked the ChatGPT to do it, and it did it, and then I looked at it, but as I say, it looked wrong. So I thought, "No, I like the line thickness that is used, so I will do it myself," and I did it, and when I compare mine to that, there's a lot more character in mine, but also it looks scruffy, and
Yeah.
because you start to get a bit OCD with everything as an artist and you want perfection. I keep thinking, well, I'm trying to draw this anyway. I want these perfect lines and I'll never get them. But when you look at it, that's all those things that make it look human. And so you can draw something very quick. And when you draw it very quick, you get a lot of expression and emotion in it. But when you sit there trying to draw every line perfectly, you sort of lose all of the soul in everything. So, and unfortunately, that's what happens when AI takes hold of what you want to do. But it was great for me to see. Oh, I can see now. It's too busy, maybe here, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tool, and I understand totally why people are frightened of it, but it's not gonna go away. So, surely rather than run away from it, the best thing to do is embrace it and try and use it, but use it to your advantage and whatever your weaknesses are, use it and let it help you learn from it because it's not going anywhere. And,
No, it's not, is it? That's, yeah.
so don't go against the grain, just use it, but make sure you stay in control of the creative side of it.
Appreciate it. No, that's a good answer. Thank you. Um, Can I talk about Battletoads for a little bit? Because Battletoads is an iconic series of games. It's one of your, I think, one of your earlier titles at Rare.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's regarded actually as one of the hardest games on the NES. I'm sure you're aware of that as well. Very tough platformer. But what was it? What was that like? Did you have full control designing these characters, or was it your responsibility to come up with these characters and whatnot?
Um, can you see me? I've just moved the camera
Oh
because
yeah, yeah,
is that better? All right, okay.
yes, perfect.
I don't know if you're using video anyway, so, um, but, as I mentioned those frogs and toads in my back garden, so, we'd done a lot of conversions and we'd done the wrestling games, um, a lot of stuff for Microprose, I think, and, some educational stuff at Rare, and we'd got Snake Rattle and Roll, Beetlejuice, Nightmare on Elm Street, Roger Rabbit, all those kind of things. And we'd built up quite a library of games, but there were original products, but um, they weren't ours,
Yeah,
a lot of them. We had our own, but Tim wanted something which was gonna be our flagship character. As Nintendo have Mario, we wanted something. So, he asked me to come up with some characters for a sort of fighting kind of platform game, and I was so heavily into martial arts at the time. I worshipped Bruce Lee, anything Bruce Lee, I just thought it was fantastic. So I did karate myself with my friend, and we all thought after playing International Karate Plus and Way the Exploding Fist that we were International Karate Plus characters. And, Then that was the other thing I before I went to Rare, before I went to college and, got the college course, there was a little arcade in the town Tamworth where I grew up with my friend, and we discovered Double Dragon,
Oh, it's a great
and it was
game.
just such a fantastic game, and, when I went to Rare, there was a leaflet that I saw on their desk. I thought, "Oh my god, what Double Dragon is? I have to work here." So I photocopied it and took it to my friend the next morning, on the Monday morning, to prove that I'd actually been there. But, because nobody believed me when I told everybody I'd seen his Lamborghini. All these guys at college, "Oh, of course you did." But my friend was like, "No, no, he's not lying. He went." But, so I was in mixing karate and Double Dragon and everything like that up with characters, and I thought, "Well, I'll call these guys the Amphibians." And I drew a picture of them all on a lily pad, and it was a really rubbish picture, but they were basically frogs, with knuckle pads and things like that on, knuckle dusters with
Nice,
spikes,
yeah.
and then that became Battletoads. But then, one guy came into work one day, and he said, "Oh, they remind me of the Ninja Turtles."
Yeah.
And he was a musician and an artist and also a huge comic fan, and I knew nothing about comics. I wasn't a Marvel fan. Apart from Whizzer and Chips and the Beano, that was as far as my comic reading went when I was a kid. And he bought this comic in the next morning. It had got these tiny little turtles in a tank and somebody feeding them, and then the next minute they were ninjas in the sewer, and I thought, "Oh, this looks incredible. It looks so much better than my stuff." What And it kinda ruined it. And then, Tim says, "Well, they're not gonna be ninjas anyway. We're gonna make them morph and their fists go big and antlers grow on them and stuff like that." And so we pulled them away from the martial arts and turned them into kind of brawlers, and the game became more of a variety game anyway. When I
Yeah.
was racing in it, riding on the back of a snake, being shot at by one of those great big walkers at the end of the first level, and each part in between was broken up with a little beat 'em up action. So, yeah, and then that was released by Trade West, and then, I met the guy Byron Cook and his dad, this huge oil tycoon that had got a video game company in America and a great big Texan hat. Look, these lovely people that only existed in movies. I was meeting them, and then they says, "Well, how do you like to make Double Dragon?"
Oh, yeah.
Excuse my terrible accent. And they had a link up with, I think it was Taito or Technos or whoever it was in Japan, and they wanted to do a marriage of Double Dragon and Battletoads, and I couldn't believe it. But I didn't get to work on it because I
Oh,
did the logo, but I was working on other projects at the time, but I just couldn't believe we'd actually got Double Dragon there with my characters in a game.
such a funny world.
It was bonkers. So,
Oh, man. I mean, it's a really well-respected game. Do you feel there's room for another Battletoads, or do you reckon that sort of ship sailed?
well, I mean, there was the reboot a few years ago, but it wasn't really Battletoads. It would look lovely, it was brilliant, and it was so perfectly animated and everything, but, and I realize things change over time, but it's not Battletoads
Yeah. Yeah.
because they don't look like it. It's like changing Spider-Man so so drastically that he ends up looking like Batman or something, or Deadpool, I guess. But, I love it, it's great, don't get me wrong, it's
Yeah.
not that it's a bad game, I just thought it's different, so it's had its reboot. I don't think it'll get another one, in the form that I created them at, which is why I created those Salamandos characters, which are a nod to the Battletoads, which we will do something with, but as I
Yeah.
said, I'm that busy. I've got the story, it's all written, I've got artwork, I've got concept, I've got models, and we've even got, say, music that I've performed with Dave and Grant on
Oh,
stage,
nice.
and everybody's curious about it, but I wanted to go concept first, cartoon, comic, or something, then game, rather than it just go out there and drown in a sea of amazing looking games, because that's all that would happen, I think. So
And that might be with Platonic Games, or is that just
no, I want to. They know that I've got the idea. Maybe you'll see a cameo of a character in there, but I want to keep ownership of it. I think as soon as I say let's put this in this game, let's do. I've lost it then. It's no longer mine, and I'd like this to be my pension fund, if you like, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or my project to keep me busy after if I ever retire. I want it to be that, and I think if I leave it to another company, then
Of course.
I mean, obviously, Donkey Kong wasn't mine, Battletoads wasn't mine, Diddy Kong
Yeah,
wasn't mine. All the characters I've been involved in are mine. I respect that, but you see them in all of the stores and on TV and everything, and you think, "Oh, it's my character," but it's not my character. So for once, I'd like to have a set of characters that if
yeah,
anything happens with them, they are still part of me, rather than something I can't touch or
I
draw
get it.
or or not
Yeah.
market and make any kind of
It's
profit from
your
it.
it's
As
your
yeah,
proper
yeah,
property completely. You're yeah.
yeah.
I've got to ask a question because Donkey Kong is iconic. Obviously, it's a Nintendo character, but you had a lot to do with Donkey Kong. He's sort of next auto, next sort of impact his image. Would you be happy to explain how that happened, Kevin? And also, and this might be a silly question, exactly what was your relationship with Nintendo, Rare and Nintendo? Because they had a very, very good
Yeah.
relationship, I think.
When
Does that
I
all tie together?
joined Rare, they were just a special developer for Nintendo. They had a really good relationship with them, um, but I think they bought a percentage of the company. I think they owned about 12% of the company um, in the late 80s or early 90s. Would have been about 92, I think, something like that. I don't know, but we'd invested in some SGI equipment. Tim wanted to make these 3D graphics, and I couldn't see where we were going with that because we were about to start work on a Super Nintendo, and I knew that it wasn't capable of producing the kind of graphics that you saw in TV ads or Terminator 2 or anything like that. But this software and this hardware was just so incredible. It was kind of real overkill.
Yeah.
Well, what do I do with this? I can build a fantastic looking Chrome Man very badly. When you look at it now, it looked awful. But at the time, I rendered a sequence of this character just sort of turning, looking over its shoulder. And it looked like something from the Lawnmower Man movie or
Yeah, yeah.
from like a CGI version of the big walking statue on Jason and the Argonauts, that Talos character. And I remember Carol came in, Tim's wife, and looked at it while I just played the sequence back, and she said, "That's the best thing I've ever seen." Which was what she meant was for a long time or here, because they had been airbrushing and we'd been pixel art, but all of a sudden we'd got this. Looked like an MTV video, and it looked like the money for nothing or something like that.
Yeah.
And but I said, "Well, but how do we put that into a game?" You assume that you're gonna put the camera there and the character's gonna be huge, but then I'll move the camera away and we'll make it stand side on, and I'll make it do this, and hang on, I can make my fighting game. So
Ah,
that's what I did. I started making characters and hand animating them, and it took so long because there was no joint system in there or anything. It was just a hierarchy. Wrist goes under forearm, forearm goes under bicep, bicep goes under shoulder, and like you just had these nodes that you twisted and set keyframes for. No IK or anything like that. So it was literally just a rigid puppet. And as soon as you tried to make something move and you bend the feet, things started floating off the ground. But I built a boxing character because it was the easiest
right.
thing to build because I didn't have to mess around with long hair because I decided I was gonna have this sort of crop Mike Tyson hair, and I didn't have to model hands because all I needed to model was a
Yeah,
big boxing
yeah.
glove. But all of the rendering and the lights did all the work. It made it look great. It was very plasticky looking, but it just looked like it was a glistening body. But it looked great and it looked really solid. So we put two of them, and I rendered it side on from a perspective camera. And then I flipped it and put it on the other side. And Tim said, "That looks great." And he bought another machine so he could go upstairs and start building a gym or a background for them to stand in. And it just went on from there, and I started building ninjas and cyborgs,
Oh,
and
wow.
I've got all the sketches because it wasn't great at building organic stuff, so I was kind of hoping I was gonna build this game with cyborgs fighting one another with perhaps a human head, on a robot body, and, Nintendo wanted to come over and see what we were up to because they had a stake in the company,
Of course, yeah.
and it was around about the time that Aladdin had been released
Oh, it's a
on,
good
and
good
it
game.
looked beautiful, and it was boasting Disney animation, and Nintendo needed something, to sort of, compete with that, and so we had this video cassette recorder, this sort of professional sort of, reel creation, a proper video editing.
Yeah.
You spool it on and you'd send the next frame to it, and then you'd send the next frame to it hand by hand from the SGI machine. You'd send these images to it, it'd capture it and record it to cassette. And we put that, and then we put some music over the top, and it had all of my characters spinning around. And I can remember we put Move On Baby by Capella from the 90s over the top of it. And Nintendo came over and they took a look at it in the meeting room while I continued making the characters. And then Tim came into my room at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, and says, "Right, they've gone now. They've gone back to Market Bosworth. I'm going to go out with them for a meal. It went really well. They loved it. I'll speak to you tomorrow. You can go home." So I went home, came back the next day, and he says, "Yeah, they want you to do this." And I've actually I've got it here. And it's something that I can't do anything with. It's the wad of faxes from Nintendo with all the sketches. I can't sell it, even though it's probably worth quite a lot of money. I can't do anything with it, but it's, some sentimental value for me because it's confidential facts, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah.
but it's the facts that said, "We'd like you to do this with Donkey Kong."
Wow, yeah, that's a big deal.
So we'd like you to build Donkey Kong because he hasn't seen the light of day for 10 years since he was in the arcade, and we'd like to try out this style on that. And I didn't really know what to do, and all I did, because I thought it was an ape, and we were only 5 miles away from the zoo at Twycross, and I went and looked at the gorilla there. It looked very unhappy, and all I remember was how unhappy he looked and how he was frowning, and, it was quite sad really, but,
Yeah, of course.
I got some videos from the video store sent to me. People, had kept gorillas in the US in their cellar, some horrible story. It was just
Yeah.
really depressing, and I thought, "Well, I better model a," and all I think of was this unhappy gorilla. And I just put these eyes on, and I ended up making the Battletoads eyes, and it looked so cross and angry because it looked like a really unhappy
Yeah.
gorilla. And, that's what I did. But it looked great when it was rendered up, and, we sent it to Nintendo, and they loved it, but they says, "Oh, but he's naked. He needs some kind of identity, and he needs to look like he's got some kind of intelligence, so can you put a tie on him?" And so we did that, and then, Donkey Kong was born, and I was really eager to get onto Killer Instinct again, which was called Brute Force at the time.
That's what you're working it would eventually become Killer Instinct, you're saying,
Yeah,
Kevin. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then the Nintendo got really excited about it because they thought, "Well, this is it. This is gonna wipe Aladdin off the face of the earth." And they started supplying. They said, "How many machines do you need?" And we went from 2 machines, and these machines were about £30,000 each, and the software to run it was about £25,000 a seat, and we had 2 seats and 2 machines. And then, Nintendo supplied us with about 30 machines,
That's crazy.
and
And yeah,
we had the Ministry of Defense call us wondering what we were doing with all this hardware. Because outside of Boeing, I think we were the biggest, user of the equipment in the UK, and it was just amazing to have all of that at your fingertips, and we had the manuals. We didn't have any tuition. Nobody came to teach us or anything. We just, all had this pile of grey, 7 or 8 manuals each, and we'd all just kinda learn from each other, and, but I wanted to get back onto my fighting game, but then, Greg came to see me and said, "No, no, we need, a sidekick character now."
yes, yeah.
So, I assumed it was Donkey Kong Jr., and I just I couldn't be bothered to build a new ape, so I just made it a silly monkey, and I didn't really pay any attention to any of the sketches that we were given, which I should have done. And, but if I had have done that, then there probably would be no Diddy Kong now. It would have been Donkey Kong Jr. Because Nintendo thought it looks good, but and we understand why you put the tail on it and everything because we wanted it for a design.
Yeah.
That's right. And so they said, well, we'll make it his nephew, and you can use him, and that's fine. And so that's what we did. And I based him on the Cocoa Pops monkey from box of cereals I grew up eating.
If people are watching this now, I've got the Diddy Kong amiibo. I'm a fan of the character, Kevin. I'm not just saying that. I really like him as a character. He does look a bit like the Cocoa Pops monkey, actually.
Well, when you look at it, though, I googled it not long ago to tell everybody on the internet, and when you look, it looks nothing like it. The Cocoa Pops one's got a little nose like a little bear or something. But yeah, just in my head, I knew I wanted to put a cap on him and the red T-shirts time with DK. So, but then they told us, "Oh, we're getting this guy over who's you can continue making your fighting game, Kevin. Don't worry. We're going to set up a team for that. And there's this guy going to come over called Ken Lobb, who's really into fighting games, and he's going to help you with that." And he kind of sat with Chris Tilston and devised a combo system with him, and I just had free reign of all of the graphics and characters and moves because I'd tried to make fighting games so many times, and Tim and Chris had said no. This was I knew what I wanted in my head and what the characters were going to be and what they were going to do, and now that I got Power Animator, I could build anything I wanted, whether I could draw it or not. All I had to do was model a lizard's arm, and the software took care of all the foreshortening and everything, and I didn't have to animate everything. I could just move this sort of armature around, and then we got approached by another company that was working alongside Alias, who made Power Animator software, and said, "Would you like to test out this motion capture software?" And it was this software by a company called Ascension and hardware, called the Flock of Birds, and it was a series of magnets which ran through cables, and we customized and made our own suit made from the Vulcan pads that they used to use in Gladiator TV series that the contestants would wear. And we sewed everything into there, and when I put the suit on, my arms rotated, it recorded all of the rotation axis values, and then it fed that into my model. You had to build your model in a certain sort of T-pose, you call it, and then it just recorded all my moves, and this guy, Simon, my friend there, would sit there with the monitor, and sometimes he'd do some of the moves. I think he did TJ Combo and Chief Thunder. And most of the rest of the characters, I just put this suit on and kicked and jumped around and stuff like that, and it recorded it, but you'd always tangle yourself up in the wires if you span around, and the suit was really stinky because it was just so hot, and they had to be tight because if the pads moved, it was taking that as a rotation of your arm, and so it had to be almost, glued to you, so but that was a really early motion capture suit, and it was that Diddy Kong Racing was my most fun time at Rare because it was a beautiful game to work on. It was lovely, brand new barn we were in and a new team, and it was such a fun game because it was a racing game, and I'd never worked on one. But Killer Instinct was it was just gold. It was just this time where I not only got this amazing equipment and I was playing with big boys toys like they would at ILM or somewhere. I was in control of the graphics, and I was in control of what characters go in there, and I was also getting into a motion capture suit and using this beta software, working directly with Alias and Ascension to get all of the bugs ironed out, it was just incredible. And it was a really exciting time to be in it because I'd get all of the videos because we didn't have DVDs then. I'd get John Stamper would go into Leicester and I'd say, "Well, I've got a list of films I want you to get me from HMV. I want Jason and the Argonauts. I wanted all the Ray Harryhausen stuff, anything that was good like that, and he'd get them for me." And I'd sit there with a video recorder in my room and with a martial arts Jean-Claude Van Damme film or something like that, and it had to be a video with a jog shuttle control on it, so I had my own video, and I had this pile of videotapes, and I was using for reference, and I would just work from those, and I would build the skeleton character, and I would build the dinosaur character, and it was so fun.
That sounds
If I
so
could
fun.
go back there now, I wouldn't be talking to you now.
Yeah, well,
I would be
and
in that time machine. It was
Killer
because
Instincts, yeah.
we were so lucky because that's not gonna happen again. It's happened. That's with computers are so amazing, games look so fabulous, but to step in at a point where you had pixels and pencils and tracing paper and felt pens and floppy disks to move on to SGI hardware with this state-of-the-art CGI that was only used in Hollywood,
It's
or only the likes of Boeing could afford it, and to have it in this little farmhouse in Twycross, 8 miles away from a place in Tamworth,
amazing.
from
And
comprehensive
Nintendo, didn't
school
they?
in Tamworth.
Nintendo helped with
It's
this. Is
just
that right?
crazy.
Oh man, I mean, Killer Instinct was great. It's such a great combo game. It looks amazing. The soundtrack as well is incredible. I mean, do you have a favorite character who you designed
I
in that
like
series?
Fulgore. I think I ripped off the Predator a little bit, but also I mixed him with a character called Baron Karza, who was a Micronauts character, and I grew up in the '70s, and they were like magnetic robots, and the main villain looked like Darth Vader, and I wanted to make him like that, but I couldn't help but give him this really Predator-like looking mask. And when you look at it now, it looks nothing like it, but I wanted this ninja with a ponytail, and I ended up mixing characters up, and eventually he had the ponytail with tiger stripes on, so like a plume, like he was meant to be like some kind of space knight, but he ended up becoming a robot. And once Robin got the sound effects discs and he started messing around with effects, and I think his effects for Fulgore's voice was, if you can call it a voice, it was pigs. It was
Really?
farm pigs, on this disc that were all grunting and squealing and stuff like that, and he put some kind of, robotized effect over the top of it. Lots of electronic sound effects, and
Yeah,
it sounds perfect for him. So but
amazing.
yeah, all that experimentation, it just Killer Instincts, I can remember it was the first time we had to put proper vocals in anything because you I'd played Street Fighter 2, and of course every character went "Huh, huh, yeah," and that kind of stuff, or said a couple of words at the end of each bout. And we got a cassette recorder, a rubbish little cassette recorder, you know, one of those flat ones with the
Yeah.
4 buttons on, and put it on the floor in Robin's music room. And we'd never had to record sound, so we didn't know what are we gonna. They'd played music and they got all the equipment for making music, but from actually recording a vocal. So I did everything that we were told to do at the karate class, and you can probably hear my accent a bit. I'm from the Midlands, and we used to go "Hoosa, hoosa," and "Yeah," and it was always I recorded all of these sounds for this Jago, and then this guy from down south listened to it, Martin Hollis. He listened to it back and says, "It sounds like a Brummy Ninja," and and not only that, it was terrible quality because I was a distance away from the microphone, you got all the room noise, and it sounded awful, the whirring of so Steven Stamper then had to create a sound booth, and we had to invest in proper microphones, and
Right.
then we had to get it right, and then Robin had to record those sound effects in a booth, with us, and, compress it all and make it sound clear, because we hadn't done any of that, and because we didn't know. Um, it just sounded bloody awful.
That is so funny. Can we talk about Diddy Kong Racing for a minute? Because
Yeah.
I love that game. I'll be honest, when I bought my N64, I was very, very close to buying Mario Kart 64, but something made me pick up Diddy Kong Racing instead. And I've defended that game countless times on a previous podcast, Kevin. I think it's better than the Mario Kart
It
64.
is. It is.
It is, isn't it?
But we had Mario Kart to stand on, you know, that got us there, but we'd obviously done our research and we were all into video games. But before I got onto that team, we were all into racing. We watched the Grand Prix and then we'd come in and in the afternoon, we'd carry on working on that, and everybody was a car enthusiast at Rare. But, the game started off with Lee Schuneman and another guy called Lee Musgrave, a brand new artist, and Chris Stamper was making this game, and it was called Adventure Racers. And I'd had a car accident actually, and so after Killer Instinct 2, I had some time off, and then when I came back, everybody had moved on to the N64, and I started building characters for what I thought was gonna be Killer Instinct 3. And I was building NURBS characters, which I was hoping to render out and turn into sprites because I thought this 3D thing's never gonna take off. And, then, Chris didn't want me on his team because he'd seen some of the things I'd built, and he knew I'd been on Killer Instinct, and he specifically wanted to make a super cute game with
Yes.
cutesy wootsy animals.
Yes.
And he said, "I don't want Kevin on the team." These are his actual words. I remember I seen that mouse he made, and there's a picture of a mouse I've rendered called Astro Mouse, and it almost looks like it's sticking his 2 fingers up. I think he's only got 3 anyway. But, he says, "I hate that mouse. I don't want Kevin on here. He makes nasty things." But he hadn't got a choice because there wasn't a character artist there.
Yeah.
Lee Musgrave was, really there to start doing backgrounds, and then Tim says, "God, Chris, if he wanted to, I'd be banging on the door to get Kevin on. Like, get him on the team, get it started." Um, so I reluctantly moved on to the team, and then, I just started making characters, and I thought, "Right, I'll show him I can make a cute character," and he gave me this book called Wild Babies, and you can Google it, and it's got these little baby badgers in it, and it's all very sweet, and I thought, "Well, I'll build that." And I built Bumper, but I didn't put the, head goggles on or anything. I just built this, and then I built this little car, which was based on, I can't show you now because it'll take up all the time, but I've got all the renders in a
Oh,
box
nice.
there. And it looked like a Renault Spider, and then, I messed around and started building the models, and the wheels were too chunky, so Rob Harrison did something fancy with sprites so that we got cool wheels on it, and we did use that for the for the propeller and the fan at the back of the hovercraft. And, I j the Chris loved it. He thought it looked really cute,
Yeah.
and the whole idea of it was taking place in a theme park, and I was
Okay.
kinda confused about it. Well, so what is it, a theme park ride game or as and, the way Lee was talking about it, 'cause Lee was new as well. It's difficult when you're starting out in the game and there's nothing to go on, and it's just ideas and words and a few scribbles and a map drawn by a designer on biro, which just is line art. What is it, you know? And it kind of evolves after a bit, and then it kinda clicks and you go, "We know what it is now. We know what we're doing. We need this hub area." But I was thinking it was gonna be like, you remember there was a game, was it called Theme Park? It may have been
It's a
called
great
Theme
game.
Park.
Yeah, it's a great game.
I
Bullfrog,
thought it
isn't
was
it?
just
Yeah.
gonna be like that. But you drove around in these little cars like dodgems,
Yeah, yeah.
and then got off your car and went on a ride, and it would be like maybe your car was on the roller coaster track or something. But and then I thought, "Well, you get out your car surely, and you adventure if they're adventure racers." And Lee said, "No, no." And we went over the design a few times, and then Chris came off the team because he was too busy actually managing the company to make a game, which we kinda knew was gonna happen because company was getting so big. And so he just handed it over to us, and we continued with it, and I don't think he really minded as long as it was a cute race of what we were doing. And then Rob wrote this animation editor for me based on what I'd been doing with the 3D software, and I was able to just suddenly move the camera around and put a very simple animation, but just track the camera and make this character look like it was traveling, even though it wasn't really doing very much. But once you got a landscape moving like this behind and the car being focused and doing a few swerves, and I did a little bit, and I said to Dave, "Can you give me some music?" And so he gave me some music, and I just took the water level and I did timber going across like this with the waves, and then made the camera follow him, and then the music changed to the different instrument, and I thought that sounded Hawaiian. It sounded like he was on a tropical beach. That really worked. So what's next? And I can't remember what the next character was, but it went on from there, and I kept on doing these little sections, and that became the start sequence of the game. And everybody's section goes with the musical instrument that is supposed
Oh
to be
wow.
associated with the character. And of course, to begin with, the game was called Adventure Racers, but it moved on, and we decided to call it RC Pro Am 64. And Timber, the tiger, was the main character, but it was kinda close to getting finished, and we got most of the characters in. We were gonna add a few more. We got Wizpig,
Yeah.
"You can't beat me." All of that, it was in there, but we needed a few more characters, and then Nintendo came over again,
Yeah.
and, they were coming to look at Banjo, I think, that was going on in the other barn, and it
Yeah.
wasn't ready. It got a long way
Yeah.
to go still. But we were nearly ready with DKR or RC Pro Am 64, and they said, "Right, we want a game this year, and this is good, and it's not really going to compete with Mario Kart because I guess they thought it wasn't as good,
Yeah.
but also they thought it was a different category because it was a racing adventure and it had got the different vehicles. We thought they were going to ask us to put DK in it, but they didn't. Tim wanted me to change the car to a tricycle. So I built a trike for Pipsy, and it didn't feel right, it didn't look right,
Yeah.
it didn't feel right skidding, and, we 'cause he wanted to do that because he wanted to just throw it off the Mario Kart
From
path
yeah, yeah, of
to
course.
help Nintendo see that it was a different game. Um, but we said, "No, we're quite happy to release it, but we don't wanna market this, we don't know, no one knows what this tiger is. Can you put Diddy in there, and we'll call it Diddy Kong Racing?" So I was a bit miffed about that because that was my Timber character was gonna be a star, but then I created Diddy, so I was okay about it. And then we did the logo, and it just looked great there with
Yeah.
Diddy. I quickly modeled Diddy up, put him in the plane, made him come around the end logo at the start because I was thinking of, I don't know which one, it was Warner Brothers or something like that with the blue sky, and Teletubbies was very popular at the time, so we had all this laughing and that, like, the baby would laugh in the sun, we're gonna go for that, and the hub world was based on Teletubbies Land with the green
Wow.
hills. And so it kind of established, whereas before all the characters were supposed to be remote control cars with little miniature versions of the main characters. And, they were you were gonna be you saw them all on the podium at the start holding up their numbers when you chose
That's
them,
right, yeah.
which was a cop out for me. It was a way I didn't have to draw a screen, and I could do it with the animation editor, and it just worked. And it was far more interesting than selecting a face. And, their cars were supposed to come along the front driving them as they were with a remote control unit, and I had this first section where Timber was running around the Nintendo racetrack, which was etched into the sand, and, the car was driving around with Timber in it, and the camera was following it, and then as the camera panned out, you saw Big Timber in control of it with a little remote control pack, and I had that all working, and Chris Stamper walked past, and this was after he'd only came and poked his head down to see how everything was going one day, and he just looked at it, "It's incredible. It's all just happened. This guy's written a tour for you. Kevin's just getting on with it, and we've got it works, and it's funny." So he was really happy about it. But, then, I had to change that whole sequence at the beginning, so I put the plane moved so nicely with the camera. That's
Yes.
why I decided to make it spin around the N logo and then swoop in after it comes into the camera, swoop down to where the N track is. And I thought, well, I also introduce the other two vehicles and have the hovercraft and the car there as well. And then you've got Pipsy and Timber and Diddy all at the start, and then it starts with the theme tune. So you were kind of a director. You know, you were your own
Of
little
course.
film director. It was just fun. but without having to do stop frame animation. You could emit some particles when your character moved along rails, which you couldn't see, and then the rails were turned off when the camera went on, and when you went over a certain node on this track, you could put what was basically a sprite icon to say emit particles, and then as soon as my character went over that, it triggered it, and then a load of sprinkles would come out, and that was the way. It was such a good editor.
Wow.
I mean, you look at it now and probably think that's terrible, but it really worked because Rob kept asking me what I wanted, and says, "If I can do this," and I drew him all these little icons, and it was like our own little bit of software. It was great.
I loved it.
So
And also Conker was born, and Conker was a nice, cute character in Diddy
yeah,
Kong, but
yeah.
he seemed
So
had
the
a bit of a
characters
bad.
that were remaining were there was 2 gaps, and I took Banjo and I took Conker. I says, "Well, if you want, you get your character, we can put him in here as a racer." And so I just built a low poly version of Conker and a low poly version of Banjo and put them in the cars, and they were in the
Then
game.
their stories continued
Yeah.
in games. I mean, after Diddy Kong, I spoke to, as you know, Dr. David Doak before. Oops, excuse me a little bit. And he was just saying how Rare was all about trying new things out, experiments and so forth. And is there any other stories you'd like to share about your time at Rare and maybe how you end up leaving Rare in the end, Kevin, if you don't mind talking about that?
Good. I got moved on to the Perfect Dark Zero team after working on Star Fox Adventures
Right, yes.
and Dinosaur Planet. But shooting games weren't really my bag. I never really. I just think they're all the same. So I
Yeah,
never
fair
really
enough.
played them very often. I get it. I enjoyed GoldenEye when it came out, but I was sent onto the team to change the look of it because it looked far too realistic to begin with. And Tim and Chris were worried about the censorship, and for a Rare game, it didn't really scream family fun if you've got this blood and super realistic normal maps on characters making it motion capture. It was too much. It was gonna get an adult rating or something, and they didn't want that, and so they wanted to dial it back, make it more colorful, make it more cartoon-like. We got Will Overton, who was a fantastic concept artist, that joined and says, "Well, we'll get Will to design a new look, and Kevin, you can direct that team and get the graphics to look different or more like, I don't know how you can say it, but a child-friendly shooting game almost, a family-friendly,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was meant to be more like a cartoon, and more in keeping with the colorful Rare games, and, so because there was a lot of, uh, dirty-looking, grimy-looking, nasty shooting games out there that's why they were like, Doom and things like that. It was all very
Sure.
popular, and they went on, with Quake and things like that. They were all quite harsh, and they didn't want it to be in that category. They wanted something different. But I, I'd come to the project was quite big, the team was big, and I'd done as much as I could on the characters towards the end of it. But I was actually getting divorced. Things weren't great in my home life because I was spending so much time at Rare, and I needed a break, and I just thought it's time to take a break. Microsoft had bought into the company, and my plan was to take maybe a year off or something. And I had a talk with Tim and Chris. With Tim, said, "Thanks very much for the opportunity. I'm gonna take some time off." And he says, "No, it's been great. 18 years, almost
So it's
19 years there." And
yeah,
I said, "Well, I'll keep in touch, obviously." And then I didn't know what to do with myself after a month or so, and I'd got some property which I was kind of developing. I was living in it. I'd got some extra. I was going to split it into 2 properties, so I was going to sink my teeth into that for a while and then come back. And I spoke to Tim, and Tim says, "Do your property, do that, and you've got a job here. When you come back,
sure.
you probably won't come in at the level you were at before because we've got to continue and function. We need a new graphics director." I says, "Well, I don't want that. I just want to continue making graphics." So I kind of went back home and got on to doing bits and pieces with the property, and then not long after that, I got a letter saying, you're not coming back." From
Oh,
Microsoft. So,
right.
I guess, there was a communication issue, but I thought, um, I'm actually quite enjoying my time doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
I'd been there for 18 years, and to be fair to them, I hadn't really communicated, but I probably needed time off. I probably needed a sabbatical or something because there was a lot of pressure on Perfect Dark Zero, and as I say, I went through a divorce too. So, I just needed some time off. I needed a break. So that was, the trigger point, and then I stopped making video games for a while and got involved in music because it was another itch that I wanted to scratch, and I did that for a while. Obviously had some great fun with a band called Voodoo Johnson, and we were
Oh,
quite
nice.
quite b we supported Europe,
Oh, cool.
Final Countdown. We
Yeah,
we
yeah.
did quite, but we got to a ceiling where we weren't getting any further, and we had the typical cliche band falling out. I've made up with those guys now, actually. It's quite fun. And, then I did a couple of projects for a couple of different companies, and then, the Platonic thing happened. And when I saw the email from Gavin to say, "Would you like to join us?" and I saw the names of the people on the list, I mean, 10 years had gone by, and,
Yeah.
I thought, "Wow, that time's gone quick." And Dave, my friend Dave Wise said, "Well, I'm doing contract stuff for that." He says, "You need to get yourself back in now,
Yeah.
you may as well jump in what if you're enjoying it again." So I spoke to Gav, I did a bit of contract stuff, and then I asked Gav if I could join, and they said, "Well, yeah, it's what we want." So not too long afterwards, I, got put on the payroll, and I've been there for 10 years now. So
Respect.
that again, it just flies by, but
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah.
great company. We're not a big company. I say I've been down there today. Quite flexible, look after people, lots of different projects going on. But, it's kind of funny 'cause there are lots of people there I worked with years ago, like Chris Sutherland. I can remember picking him
Yeah,
up in, like, 1988, 89 when he came and got his job on the first day, and I'd got this little red Peugeot that they'd bought me, and, that's how we first met. And then you look now, and we're both, like, 40 years later.
yeah.
It's just crazy. And David Wise, that we're in that picture in the Games Machine magazine, standing there on the grass, and he's 60 in a short while, and we need to celebrate that, and we were talking about it the other day. You can remember everything, specifically these chunks of game development as if it
Yeah.
was yesterday, and the excitement of getting a new console or new hardware or a new keyboard that he would get or something, and how vivid it is as a memory. But it's 30 years, 40 years ago, some of it, but you can remember it like yesterday.
That's mad. Yeah.
And I think we're quite lucky to still work in that industry because you kinda don't really get to grow up because you're still making toys,
Yeah,
aren't
yeah,
you?
yeah. Good on you.
So and, one thing for sure, as you know, my voice is going hoarse now because I just ramble about it, but I never thought when I took that break from it and I came back and then I discovered retro gaming and somebody asked me to take part in a podcast, and I went to the Doncaster, video game market
Nice.
and to Play Expo. I was just amazed at all these little kids with their dads getting cartridges out of these boxes and asking the dad if it was okay, and the dad saying, "Yeah, that's a good one." And then
Yeah.
when I walked into this place and I just see Banjo and DK and everything everywhere, I thought, "This is just such a big part of me. Why did I turn my back on it and jump out of it?" Obviously, I needed the break and I wanted to do the music thing, but I look at it now and, we years ago, we'd get a PlayStation and then we get a PlayStation 2, and I'd just take it to the dump, the old one, and put it by the skip
Well,
for
yeah,
somebody to
yeah,
take. And now these things are worth quite a bit of money,
yeah.
and I never ever thought, because we passed it off as last year's game or the old tech, you gotta play that NES game, now you've got a Super Nintendo, and now you gotta play that. NES game. Now you've got an N64. It's
Right.
you thought it would just be completely forgotten about, and now that people are playing it,
I
you
love
couldn't
it.
have made it up. You couldn't have convinced me at the time that people would be talking about the games, or we'd be talking about the games to people that want to know
Yeah,
30 years
it's true.
later,
I
and the
agree.
rest, So
You
it's brilliant, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity I had. I worked my ass off, same as everybody else did. We all did. We worked really hard, really long nights. We didn't go on holiday. We were over the Christmas holidays. You were there at the weekends, but we only did it because we enjoyed it. And there was such a community there in this purpose built sort of premises in the middle of nowhere. And we'd go out and have a curry at the weekends, or we'd go out drinking at the weekends, and then in the afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, what are you going to do after you've been into Leicester and bought whatever from HMV? You ended up rolling back at Rare because Tim's parents had cooked food, and then you carried on and you were there till 6, 7 p.m. and then go home to your girlfriend and watch The Simpsons, and that was my weekend.
Oh, I love these stories.
So
Um, can you tell us, are you allowed to talk about any games you're working on right now, given it's always a bit hush hush at the moment?
I'd love to. All I can tell you is we don't work on just one project at Playtonic. We got uh, all kinds of different projects going on, but I can't tell you what any of them are, unfortunately.
Fully understand.
But yeah, we're very busy.
Good, good, good. I've just got a couple of questions left, and I'll let you go because I know you're a very busy man. But I like to ask all my guests actually if you could like list or name maybe your three personal favorite video games of all time, because we've had some really interesting answers. So what games do you like playing outside of like, the ones you've made, obviously?
There's, as I say, it was Double Dragon in the arcade. I would list that one definitely. I do love Diddy Kong Racing because although it's my own game, I prefer it to Mario Kart because it's so much deeper. And yeah, it's slow, choppy frame rate in places, but it's more for sentimental value and the fun and the comedy value of it. Um, those classics, The Last Ninja, Exploding Fist, International Karate, all those games on the Commodore 64. Repton on the Acorn Electron. I loved it.
Ah,
It was like Boulder Dash. Um, shooters like R-Type, all old school stuff,
yeah,
Street Fighter 2, without a doubt, Mortal Kombat. Anything that's great against another player, like the old FIFA games, anything,
uh,
racing games like Ridge Racer, that whole 90s vibe. So yeah, there's a lot of them, but I do also like to play really crappy, clunky retro games like Cavalon or, that whole MAME thing. I love that.
yeah, yeah,
And some of the worst games that you could have got on your Commodore 64 or whatever, I'll load them. I'm so sentimental about it. Like Christmas comes and I wait till my wife goes out the house and I've got it, and I always remember my friend, having a Commodore 64 and going down to play at his house, and I remember going into Boots and typing things about your friends on there, 10 print, 20 go to 10, and a message in BASIC would print up, and then you'd run away and all the shop assistants would have to go and turn the machines off because they didn't know how to stop it. But there was always this one thing that fascinated me, and that was the Commodore 64's Christmas demo.
ah,
If you Google it, it's awful, but it's really charming, and it's just lots of hymns and Christmas ditties like Rudolph and Silent Night, and they've just got some really basic graphics, no good graphics, the very limited early graphics on the Commodore
yeah.
64. And just before Christmas this year, it's kind of tradition. I'll always find it on YouTube and watch it for 5 minutes with a hot chocolate, and then watch something like Tales of the Unexpected, something really old and retro. But I'm the same with the games. I like looking at the games because they just take you back. Not
Yeah.
necessarily to play, but just to actually look at them, and just see what the graphics look like, and they look rubbish, and you can't play a lot of them now because they don't play that well, but just to soak up that bit of nostalgia, so
I love it. Um, Kevin, you've been an amazing guest, and I really appreciate your time today. We always finish with one final question, though. We've got some very interesting answers over the last few years doing this, but I'd love to know if you could share a few drinks with any video game character, whether it's your own or any
Character.
character, who would you choose and why? Would it be Donkey Kong? I'll be interested.
No, it'd be, if I was gonna have a drink with somebody, I'd probably pick, Chun-Li or Ken
Ah,
from Street Fighter. So Chun-Li and Ken, and,
good
I'd
answers.
sit with them and we'd have a beer, and then we'd go and play Just Dance or something like
Oh,
that.
that sounds like a great evening. Oh, Kev. Well, look, we can find you on X, can't we? Still, you've got a website, like
Yeah,
you
I'm
said.
on
Do you,
X. I don't use X very much anymore. I mean, as I say, I was set up my art. I'm trying to concentrate on art now and sell some art as well as in my spare time. I'm doing the teaching thing with Dave Wise in Norway and David Doak. And I've set myself up on Insta, and it's Kev Bayliss Art on Insta now. So yeah, that's where to go. That's where all
you
my
know,
new stuff's going to be.
check it out. Look, well, look, Kevin, I really do appreciate your time, like I keep saying, and it's been a real honor. So thank you,
Brilliant.
thank
Thanks
you.
very much.